An Essay on Israel by Rabbi Dosick. The Talmud claims 10 measures of beauty were given to the world, 9 were taken by Jerusalem, 1 by the rest of the world. The Talmud must have been speaking metaphorically because, physically, except for a few rare and stunning vistas, Jerusalem and all of Israel is far from beautiful. Unless it is well tended, the north can be insect-infested swampland. The south is dry, barren desert. The winds off the sea swirl sand onto the coastal plains. Jerusalem herself is isolated and remote, hilly and rocky, with no natural source of water. The old joke is that if Moses had only turned left instead of right, rather than being in this desolate land, we'd all be on the French Riviera. Yet anyone who has ever been to Jerusalem knows that the Talmud is right. For Israel and Jerusalem possess an inherent beauty, an innate splendor. In Israel, the sky seems bluer, the water tastes sweeter, the air feels purer than anywhere else. The sun splays its brilliant rays against the ancient stones and bathes them in gold. Israel is alluring, enthralling, bewitching. Jerusalem is a city of magic. In the words of the Midrash, the land of Israel is the holiest of all lands, and in the heart of the psalmist, Jerusalem is the joy of all the earth. The Jewish attachment to Israel and Jerusalem is strong and deep. It is the land God promised to Abraham and to his descendants in every generation. It is the land of destination and destiny. The children of the people of Israel journeyed through the desert to become the children of the land of Israel. It is the land where the kings of Israel built a nation, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Exodus chapter 19 verse 6. It is the land where God's holy people built God's holy sanctuary so that God's glory could dwell in their midst. It is the land where the prophets walked, cajoling and inspiring, demanding justice and expecting compassion, calling for decency and goodness from God's precious but sometimes stubborn children. It is the land that was devastated and destroyed by the enemy, sundering the people from their place, imposing painful and lonely exile on the people ripped from their home. It is the land where the sages taught, bringing down God's word once again, as it had once been brought down from Sinai, to instruct and guide God's chosen people. It is the land that was devastated and destroyed a second time, wrenching God's people away from God's holy land, condemned to wander the earth, bereft and homeless. It is the land for which Jews yearned and prayed for almost 1,900 years of dispersion. Jews were in the West, said the medieval poet Yehuda Halevi, but our hearts were in the East, longing for Jerusalem. Every day, 3 times a day, the pleas bombarded the heavens. Return us, restore our land, bring us home, re-establish your kingdom, sound the call of our freedom, gather us from the 4 corners, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. It is the land to which Jews finally came home. Through all the ages I dreamt to behold you. I yearned and yearned for the light of your splendor. Jerusalem, O Jerusalem, shine forth, for your exiles return. Jerusalem, O Jerusalem, your ruins I shall soon rebuild. a folk song. I rejoiced when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet stood inside your gates, O Jerusalem. Psalm 122, verses 1 to 2. How fortunate are we! How good is our portion! How pleasant our lot! How beautiful our heritage! The morning prayer. Of all the generations of Jews, scattered and dispersed, of all the generations of Jews who have longed and hoped, of all the generations of Jews whose suffering was intense and whose need was great, of all the generations of Jews who have cried out, how long, O Lord, how long? It is this, our generation, that bears witness to the miracle. We thank you and we praise you, O Lord our God, for bringing us to this moment, the promise long delayed, once again fulfilled, the Jewish people in the Jewish land. Who are we, especially those of us who have lived in safe and secure homes all our lives, to know of exile and wandering and suffering? Who are we, especially those of us not old enough to remember a world without the modern state of Israel, to speak of restoration and return? Who are we, especially those of us who have not risked our lives for Israel's survival and not given our children to her defense, to triumph in her existence? In God's vast and to us unknown plan, we have been chosen from amongst the chosen people to be given the gift of Israel, reborn in our time. Those who live in the land and those who are bonded to the land through spirit accept the privilege and the responsibility of inheriting the land with joy, with thanksgiving, and with humility. And we feel the gentle arms of the past hugging us in triumph and the eager hands of destiny pointing us toward the future. I first went to Israel in 1965 when I was a teenager. I felt the excitement of a country in its youth, overcoming adversity, proud and a bit arrogant, exuding confidence, earnest and ambitious, and I felt the frustration of peering through the barbed wire, forbidden from going to the holy sites of Jerusalem by politics and guns. This may sound silly, but of all the incredible historical, military and religious sites I saw that summer, the most awesome to me were the sewer covers in the streets of Jerusalem. For the sewer covers were emblazoned with the symbol of the Lions of Judah and with the Hebrew word Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. In their pedestrian simplicity, those sewer covers made a profound statement, for there is no greater evidence of the true independence of a country than when its sewer covers carry its national symbol and its name. After almost 1,900 years of foreign occupation, the Jewish land could cast its own sewer covers and shout out its freedom. 5 years later, in 1970, I returned, this time in the midst of my studies. On the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, which that year fell on August the 11th, I walked down the valley and up the hill toward the Temple Mount in the old city of Jerusalem, 3 years in Jewish hands. In my mind's eye, I saw the scene of exactly 1,900 years before. On the 9th day of the same Hebrew month of that year, the year 70 of the Common Era, Jews were not walking toward the Temple Mount, but were running the other way, fleeing in terror. For at that very moment, Roman soldiers were utterly destroying the city. The Holy Temple was in flames. Men, women, and little children were being slaughtered. Blood flowed ankle deep in the streets. Jerusalem was being laid waste. But on this day, Jews were coming back, gathering at the Holy Wall, the last vestige of the Temple Mount. The temple itself was long gone, yet the Jews remain to worship God. The powerful Romans were long gone, yet the Jews remain to tell the story. The enemy soldiers who brought destruction and death were long gone, yet the Jewish soldiers remain to provide protection and security. Exactly 1,900 years after the Jews were murdered by the foreign soldiers invading their land, Jewish soldiers stood guard in the restored and independent Jewish land, assuring Jewish freedom, guaranteeing Jewish safety. Sewers and soldiers, the symbols and the certainty of Israel reborn. The Third Jewish Commonwealth, the modern state of Israel, is home to millions of Jews. Some are descendants of Jews rooted in the land for generations. Some came during the periods of Aliyah, the pre-state times of both legal and illicit immigration. Some came barely alive, the battered and broken remnants of the horrors of Hitler's hell. Some came in swift migration from the countries of the East. Some have come throughout the years from lands of freedom and in freedom newly gained. The Jews of modern Israel have built a country and a society deeply rooted in ancient values, tempered by all the realities of contemporary life. They are the modern inhabitants of an ancient land, the contemporary stewards of antiquity's promise. For the contemporary Jew living outside the land, the Jewish people living in the Jewish land have, in the words of the modern prayer, nurtured our pride and renewed our hopes. They have gathered in our homeless and healed the bruised and broken. Their struggles have strengthened us, their sacrifices have humbled us, their victories have exalted us, their achievements have enriched us. Since that glorious day in 1948 when modern Israel came into being, we have lived with her, shared her struggles, rejoiced with her and cried with her, built her with our hands, supported her with our dollars and visited her time and time again. We love Israel because she is, for us, spiritual and holy. But we have learned that we must deal with her too, in the stark terms of international realpolitik, as one nation state among many, as a country judged by others, not for her moral mandate, but for her political savvy, as a public entity often splintered by partisan factionalism, as a bureaucracy often caught up in its own disarray, as a government that tries and fails and tries again, that makes mistakes and pays the price, that wants only to improve the lot of its citizens, even if the public good is sometimes elusive and hard to know. At first, our pride and our exultation knew no bounds. We were amazed at how that little band of citizen soldiers, underarmed, unequipped, untrained, defeated the massive Arab armies to assure the survival of the newly independent state. We knew that it could only be their spirit and their resolve that brought them victory, especially when we heard this jocular story that Israelis tell about themselves. There was, so the story goes, a border kibbutz that was being shelled by the enemy. At any moment the invaders could come to overrun the settlement and kill the men, women and children. But there were only a few guns and no more ammunition. Yet something had to be done to protect the kibbutz, so as night fell they sent Haim out on guard duty and gave him a broomstick. "Put this on your shoulder," they said, "and pretend that it's a gun. If intruders come in the darkness, perhaps they'll see the shadow of the broomstick on your shoulder, think it's a rifle, and be scared away. So Chaim went out to guard the kibbutz, marching back and forth, broomstick on his shoulder. All of a sudden, he heard footsteps coming from the woods. He took his broomstick off his shoulder, pointed it into the woods, and called out, "Halt, or I'll shoot!" The footsteps kept coming. "Halt! Halt, or I'll shoot!" he demanded. But the footsteps kept coming. "Halt, or I'll shoot!" he yelled with much more bravado than he felt, pointing his broomstick menacingly toward the woods. But the footsteps kept coming. All of a sudden, Chaim saw a face emerging from the woods. He looked carefully and he saw his own brother, Moshe. "Moshe! Moshe!" he cried. "What's wrong with you? Why didn't you stop when I yelled 'Halt'? You didn't know that this is only a broomstick. I might have shot you and killed you." And Moshe looked at Chaim, stood straight up, puffed up his chest, and said, "You can't hurt me. I'm a tank." We were awestruck when the people in the land fulfilled the vision of the ancient prophet. They shall rebuild the ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall till gardens and eat their fruits. Amos chapter 9 verse 4. We looked on in wonder as, in the words of the modern prayer, they made the wilderness like Eden and the desert like the garden of the Lord. In 1967, with Israel's stunning and complete victory in the Six-Day War, every Jew in the world shared a new measure of confidence, of esteem, of glory. Not only was Israel's military triumph extraordinary, but her moral courage was exceptional. After that war, a book entitled The Seventh Day was published, recording the experiences of some of the Israeli soldiers. One soldier related, "When we got to the base on the West Bank, we found the storemen and the cooks absolutely rolling in the things they had looted from the village. Then I remember the CO got all the company together in a semicircle and stuck the storemen and the cooks in the middle along with their loot. Then he started quoting them chapter and verse of the Bible. 'Thou shalt not plunder, thou shalt not, thou shalt not.' It was really impressive. After he had finished, one of the storemen got up and asked, 'What about that bit in the Bible? And when Jehoshaphat and his men came to take away the spoil, what do you make of that?' So the CO began to explain that Rashi, commenting on the verse, says that it should be taken to mean that a conquering army takes only what it needs during the fighting. I stood in a corner and I thought to myself, what a peculiar army this is. But there really was something in it. After that, there was no more looting in our company. That is the kind of Israel we all respect and love. An Israel where a commanding officer of an army unit quotes Bible to teach his soldiers ethical conduct, where the soldiers are steeped enough in learning to be able to counter with another verse, and where the issue is resolved through an interpretation from a medieval biblical commentator. The Israel of the Six-Day War understood the teaching of the prophet, speaking in the name of God, "Not by might nor by power, by my Spirit, said the Lord of hosts." Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. That was an Israel that lived the vision of its first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, who taught, "The state of Israel will prove itself, not by material wealth, not by military might or technical achievement, but by its moral character and its human values. Yet victory is not always as sweet as it first seems. Israel, praised and celebrated for her military prowess and her manifest spirit, was left to govern the territories she had captured, left to deal with the people she had conquered, left to engage a world that was little used to Jewish parity. In the beginning, Israel was hailed. She brought electricity and running water and toilets and roads and schools to people who had been suppressed and oppressed by their governments for the 19 years between 1948 and 1967. But the inherent human craving for self-determination and independence was more powerful than physical amenities. Soon, Syria, which for 19 years had used the Golan Heights for nothing more than to shoot rockets down into Israel's border kibbutzim, claimed that the empty hills were her Mother Earth. Soon, Egypt, which for 19 years had used the Sinai Desert for nothing more than war games, claimed that the barren sand dunes were Holy Land. Soon there was an outcry for an independent Palestinian state in the West Bank. It was a curious demand, for who had heard a word about Palestinian self-determination for the 19 years that Jordan had used people as political fodder, keeping them in squalid refugee camps, rather than integrating them into society? Who had heard of the desire for a Palestinian state in the 19 years that Jordan controlled the West Bank? Who, for that matter, had heard much of people or a political entity called Palestinians? In a historical second, almost the entire world joined the Arab world in making a new demand on Israel. If you want peace with us, you must give back the land which you took from us when we went to war against you. Israel was issued a unique and unbelievable ultimatum, never before given to any country in the recorded history of the world. In order to have peace, the victor must return land to the vanquished. The occupation became a burden, an albatross, a quagmire of conflicting interests. The military victory of the Yom Kippur War of 1973 exacted its psychic toll. The ongoing war of attrition, the random terrorist attacks, the boggled incursion into Lebanon, the civil disobedience of the Intifada, the killings, defensive and offensive, continued to shake Israel at her very roots and cut deep into the national conscience. Everyone agreed Israel must be able to survive and flourish in secure and defensible borders. Israel must find her way to peace with her neighbours, but few in Israel could agree on how best to achieve her goals. The daily battle, liberally tempered with both self-doubt and self-confidence, was between resistance and accommodation. Israeli society and Jews living around the world split in two, the hardliner hawks and the conciliator doves. Israelis and Jews living around the world were confused, pained and deeply saddened, and began asking hard, probing questions. Is this the people and the land that were called by God to be a light unto the nations, after Isaiah chapter 42 verse 6 and 49 verse 6? Is this land God gave to us an everlasting possession, ours, only through force and intimidation? Is this land that God promised us best secured by building instant settlements? Is this land best protected by bombing villages to root out suspected terrorists? Is this the much lauded Israeli army shooting into crowds of children? Question and criticize we can and must, lovingly yet forcefully, for our moral sensibilities are sorely tested, our sense of justice, of fairness, of right and wrong severely challenged. The Arabs want what we Jews have always wanted: freedom and independence, self-determination and self-rule in their own land. Arab mothers want their children to grow up safe and secure in a place of peace. We, who have been oppressed for so long, have become, for many, the oppressors. Have we lost our direction, our focus? Have we forgotten our moral mandate, our eternal mission? Israelis agonize over the dilemma, fiercely determined to safeguard their own people and land against all danger and peril. At the same time, they affirm human dignity and rights for all peoples. Wanting to recapture the spirit and vision of its beginnings, Israel valiantly seeks a just solution that will satisfy everyone. Israelis of every political persuasion, Arab governments, the Palestinians, world Jewry, the nations of the world, and world public opinion. The Jews of the world share Israel's quandary, but the stakes are not the same. Our sense of morality and justice may be challenged, but it is not our sons and daughters who daily defend the land with their lives. So, how can we ever know the pressures and the tensions of assuring daily survival? How can we question Israel's means of protecting herself in the best way she knows how? Why do we still sit here in relative comfort and safety while our brothers and sisters build the land and fend off the danger? Our doubts or ambivalence fade when we remember Golda Meir's warning: the Arabs can lose 1,000 times, but we can lose only once. So we say to Israel, we will continue to question and criticize and call you to moral account, but here are our hearts and our hands. We are your partners in building up and sustaining our homeland. We share with you in your struggles. We offer you our knowledge, our skills, our participation, our love. We are inextricably bound together. What happens to any Jew happens to every Jew. What happens to the land of Israel happens to all the people of Israel. We know that together we can overcome any obstacle, meet the emerging challenges and forge a secure, peaceful, worthy future for the Jewish people in the Jewish land. For we know that there is so much at stake. We know with the first chief Rabbi of Israel, Rav Kook, that it is in the Holy Land that the spirit of our people will develop, and they will become again a light for the world. So we yearn for the day when God will, in the words of the evening prayer, spread over us the tabernacle of peace, over us and over Jerusalem. And we yearn for a just and a lasting peace for Israel and her neighbours, open boundaries for travel and trade and cultural exchange, life without the constantly lurking shadow of attack and destruction, the end of violence, new security and safety. We yearn for the day when the lion and lamb will lie down together, when in Israel and across her borders, air raid shelters will be turned into nursery school rooms and military bunkers will become playgrounds. And with the psalmist, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be at peace. May there be well-being within your walls, peace within your citadels. For the sake of my kin and my friends, I say now, peace unto you. For the sake of the Lord, our God, I seek your good. Psalm 122, verses 6 to 9. Peace for the land and the people of Israel. We who live outside the land have our own peace disturbed by a question that nags at us and haunts us. For 1900 years, Jews who wandered from land to land, Jews who lived as guests in host countries, Jews who suffered and died at the hands of the persecutors and the tyrants, would have crawled on hands and knees if only they had the opportunity to end the exile and come home to the Jewish land. Now, for the first time in 1900 years, nothing stands in our way. The land is there, the gates are wide open, the gleaming El Al jet is poised on the runway. Yet we who could return to our homeland do not. Instead, we remain in the country of our birth or the country of our sojourn, the countries of our comfort and convenience. What, we wonder, will history say of us? What do we say of ourselves, the first Jewish generation in 1900 years that can finally return to a free and independent land of Israel, but chooses not to do so? What will history say of us? What do we say of ourselves, the voluntary exiles, the Jews of the diaspora, who choose to remain in the diaspora even though our ancestral homeland beckons, welcomes, and needs us? I cannot answer the question myself, for, after all, I am the question. So I took my question to Jerusalem, where, for you and for me, I asked my friends. I asked Carmi, who owns a jewellery store on Ben Yehuda Street. I asked Olga and her son Yigal, who own a bakery in the centre of town. I asked Shaike, who guides tourists throughout the land. I asked Eli, who drives a bus but still goes off to the army to manoeuvre tanks for at least 30 days a year. I asked David and Rita, Johnny and Dina, Moshe and Marjorie, John and Natalie, Jerry and Maggie, American colleagues and friends who have made Aliyah. I asked hotel clerks and university professors and government officials. I asked lifelong Israelis and new immigrants. I asked anyone and everyone who would listen to my question and respond with a thoughtful answer. I had anticipated some of the replies. Come here, be with us, we need you, your people need you, your land needs you. The only place for a Jew to be is in Israel. How can you live anywhere else? How can you even consider staying in America when Israel needs every Jew she can get? In America, you do nothing that is really important. In Israel, you will add Jewish strength to the Jewish land. If you do not come, Jewish history will belittle you and condemn you. Jewish history will never forgive you for not coming to join your people when you had the chance. While I expected an answer like this, it was nevertheless chilling to hear. Am I really forsaking my people by not returning to Eretz Yisrael? Have I sold out to the comforts and luxuries of America when my people need me? Have my prayers to God been hollow and my commitment to Jewish unity empty? While my soul struggled with these stark questions, I heard another answer to my query from many of the people I questioned. It was a very different answer, but it was equally nagging and challenging. No, I was told, Jewish history will not condemn you for not coming to live in Israel. History will understand that for one of the rare and precious times in 1900 years, there are two great centres of Jewish life and Jewish creativity, Israel and the United States. We have our job here. We build and defend the land. You have your job there. You support us and give us courage and love, and you create a dynamic Jewish life for yourselves and for us. The two jobs are very different, but they are equally important. It takes both of us to keep Jewish life strong. We here in Israel keep the homeland secure. You keep the American Jewish community vibrant. In your strength, we are strengthened, and Jews, Judaism, and the Jewish land all prosper. But, my friends warned, Jewish history will condemn you if you do not do your job well. We have the Jewish land on which to live Jewish lives, rhythmed by the Jewish calendar, marking the Jewish holidays, walking the paths of Jewish history, speaking the Jewish language, reading Jewish literature. Even if we are not religiously observant, we are immersed every day in the continually unfolding Jewish experience. But you, why have so many Jews forsaken God? Why do so few Jews in America attend synagogue? Why do so few Jewish children get a decent Jewish education? Why can't Jews read the Jewish book in the Jewish language? Why have so many assimilated? Why have so many intermarried? Why are you having so few Jewish babies? How can America be a centre for Jewish creativity if America's Jews are not committed to leading Jewish lives? You need not come to live in Israel to fulfill your role as a Jew in the modern world, I was told. But if you remain in America, then you all must be serious, committed, involved Jews there. You must participate in Jewish ceremonies and rituals, celebrate Jewish holidays, give money to Jewish causes, marry Jewish men and women, have lots of Jewish babies. That is the way for you to meet your Jewish obligations. We will send our sons to defend the land. You send your sons and daughters to good Jewish schools and bring them up in good Jewish homes. We will keep the land strong. You keep the faith strong. Together we will meet history's questions, and together we will give history a resoundingly affirmative answer of Jewish unity and Jewish affirmation. So, there is the answer. Some Israelis want us there to build, defend, and strengthen the land. Others are perfectly willing to have us stay in America as long as we build, defend, and strengthen the faith. Some of us will choose to go to Israel, others will choose to remain in America, but with either choice, both we now know valid and worthy, we are to be not passive observers, but active participants in building up and sustaining the Jewish people, the Jewish land, the Jewish heritage. Then history will not have to question us. History will be very proud of us. For all their earthly reality and worldly concerns, Israel is a land alone, and Jerusalem is a city like no other. A midrash teaches, just as the navel is placed in the centre of the human body, the land of Israel is placed at the centre of the world. Israel is the centre of the world. Jerusalem is the centre of Israel, and the temple is the centre of Jerusalem. In the Holy of Holies there was a stone, the foundation stone of the world. A 1581 woodcut map by the cartographer Heinrich Bunting has the world in the shape of a three-leafed clover. Europe, Asia and Africa are each a leaf, spread out from the centre circle, which is Jerusalem. The modern writer Israel Zangwill taught that Jerusalem is more a state of mind than a place, and Eli Wiesel captured her essence for himself and for us when he was asked, "You were born in Transylvania, you have apartments in New York and Paris, you teach in Boston, where is your home?" Replied Wiesel, "Jerusalem, when I am not there." The Talmud puts it more succinctly. Jerusalem is eternity. The great dramas of existence will be played out in her. Her very name embodies the eternal quest, for she is called Ir Shalom, the city of peace. Her very being bespeaks the eternal mission. It shall come to pass in the days to come that the mountains of the house of the Lord will be established as the highest of mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. And all the nations shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountains of the Lord, to the house of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For from out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 to 3. Her very presence evokes the eternal vision of the long-awaited moment of ultimate redemption. At that time Jerusalem will be called the throne of the Lord, and all nations shall assemble there in the presence of the Lord in Jerusalem. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 17. That is why tradition teaches that when the world has been perfected under the kingdom of God, when Mashiach, the Messiah, comes, he will enter into the gates of Jerusalem. Within her holy walls, the celebration of joy and thanksgiving will begin, and everyone who has ever lived will return to that sacred place. Yet, with all her earthly tasks, it is not enough for Jerusalem to be only the Jerusalem below. Jerusalem is more. For according to the Midrash, out of his great love for the Jerusalem below, God made another Jerusalem in the highest heavens. It was not enough for his children to dwell in the earthly Jerusalem. God himself wanted Jerusalem as his own heavenly abode, so he made the Jerusalem above. Thus, the eternal connection, the earthly Jerusalem as the inspiration for the heavenly Jerusalem as the ideal for the earthly Jerusalem, interwoven, inseparable, timeless, limitless, never-ending. But it is not even enough to have two Jerusalems, one in the heavens and one on earth. The Midrash teaches in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Jerusalem is destined to be elevated and rise up until she touches the throne of glory. Jerusalem is the mystical place where heaven and earth meet, where the glory of God and the greatness of God's children become one. Jerusalem is the heart of the Jewish people, the soul of humankind, the Spirit of God. Israel and Jerusalem, enduring reality, eternal symbol, life breath itself. The reality of the Jewish people in the Jewish land, once, again and forever, the symbol of the long-awaited perfection of the world, the end of days at God's holy mountain, the coming of Mashiach, the ultimate redemption, the very life breath of existence. O Israel, sang the poet, the very life of souls is in your land. Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her, all you that love her. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 10. And give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem and makes her praised on earth. Isaiah chapter 62, verse 7. For Zion's sake I will not be silent, for the sake of Jerusalem I will not be still, until her triumph emerges radiant and her deliverance like a flaming torch. Isaiah chapter 62, verse 1. The fervent prayer for the Jewish people and the Jewish land is recited time after time, day after day. It is a prayer to which all people of peace and goodwill can add a heartfelt Amen. As God establishes peace in the highest heavens, so may he establish peace for us, for the people and the land of Israel, and for all humankind, now and forevermore.